More than 24 former immigration detainees have been charged with offences since the High Court ordered their release. Of the 153 detainees released in the wake of last year's ruling, 28 have been charged with new offences. Despite having passed preventative detention orders last year, the laws are yet to be used to re-detain high-risk offenders.
What you've seen from our government is a methodical, calm way of cleaning up the migration mess that we were left. What we also know, of course, is that we argued against these detainees being released, and if we had our way as a government, they would never have been released from detention.
Immigration Minister Andrew Giles is staring down calls from the opposition to resign over what the issue known as Direction 99 issued last year. The direction sets out 5 considerations the Administrative Appeals Tribunal must take into account when deciding whether to overturn a visa cancellation. One of those factors is the strength of the person's ties to Australia, which has been used by dozens of serious offenders in order to help them remain here. The opposition wants this direction torn up and the minister sacked. Let's bring in now the Shadow Home Affairs Minister, James Patterson. What needs to be done to get rid of Direction 99?
Well, number one, its principal author, Andrew Giles, should be sacked. He's been shown to have no judgment when it comes to community protection. He puts everything before community protection, and the results are plain for people to see. At least 3, possibly 4, child sex offenders who are allowed to stay in Australia as a result of this direction. Number 2, after he's sacked, the next thing the Prime Minister or the new minister should do is repeal Direction 99 and return to the previous direction under the coalition government, which did genuinely put community safety first and which deported people who were violent non-citizens.
There was a caveat in the direction, correct me if I'm wrong, which says if an individual's behaviour is so appalling that the tribunal can rule out those connections to Australia and get rid of them as normally would have happened previously.
It says that, but at the same time, in this new primary direction about ties to Australia, it says basically the longer your ties to Australia, even serious offending can allow you to stay as long as it's a long tie to Australia. And that's what the AAT has done. And they've not just done it once, which you might put down to a single member of the AAT or a bad decision, but they've done it on dozens of occasions. In fact, people who came here in their late teens and their 20s and even 30s who committed child sex offences and other serious offences have been allowed to stay, and the AAT members lay it out in their decision-making that the reason is Direction 99 and their requirement to consider strengths was ties.
Not some rogue member of the tribunal. This is a consistent pattern now.
It is senior members of the AAT, it is multiple members of the AAT, it is 2 former Labor politicians who are members of the AAT. These are people who are making decisions based on the guidelines Andrew Giles gave them.
How soon could... If the direction was to be removed, that would come into effect immediately, would it?
Almost instantaneously. It's a regulation issued by the minister.
So it doesn't have to go through the Senate?
There's no parliamentary process required at all. It doesn't have to go to the House or the Senate. The minister can repeal it tomorrow. He can issue a new one, or we can revert to the previous one with no issues at all.
When you look at some of the individuals that have been able to have their deportations overturned, this, quite frankly, would never have happened, not only under a former coalition government, but former Labor governments, and the government had wanted to get rid of these individuals by issuing deportation notices.
That's right, Kieran. Prior to this government, it was standard practice. If you're a non-citizen and you commit a serious crime, no matter how long you've lived in this country, you are deported. And it's changed under this government because Anthony Albanese gave in to a request by Jacinda Ardern. Now, the New Zealand government made the same request to our government, and we politely said, we value our relationship with you as our friends, our closest partners in the region, but we are not going to allow violent criminals to stay in our country who aren't citizens just to make life easier for you.
Could a scenario be, could we see a situation where the government could say, OK, we'll honour this deal with New Zealand, but make it explicit that it's only to do with New Zealand? Every other criminal or someone alleged of criminal behaviour, gone.
Well, they haven't done that. They've applied it to all nationalities, not just New Zealanders, and some of the people who we've read about in the media this week are from countries other than New Zealand. But the problem with that approach, Kieran, is that by volume, the largest number of migrants who are caught in this in New Zealand is not because they're particularly criminally inclined, but because there's so many of them in our country who don't have citizenship because it's been very easy for New Zealanders to come here. And so even if you said, OK, it's only New Zealanders that we're not going to deport if they've been here for a while, that's still a whole lot of people who've committed very serious crimes. In fact, one of the worst crimes that we've read about is of a New Zealand citizen who allegedly raped his 14-year-old stepdaughter, while his partner was in hospital giving birth to his child. I mean, it doesn't get more horrific than that. There should be serious consequences for people like that.
Yeah, indeed. It's horrific. I don't think there'd be anyone watching who doesn't think that person should be booted at the first possible opportunity.
Except Andrew Giles, apparently.
Well, you've had the Senate estimates today. You've had Home Affairs before the hearing. Has there been any reassurance about the cohort released off the back of the High Court ruling that group is being monitored appropriately?
Well, none whatsoever so far, Kieran. And in fact, information which Home Affairs gave me in the February estimates by way of a tabled document, they're now refusing to give me by way of a tabled document, and saying I have to ask each of these questions individually, despite the fact that Stephanie Foster gave me a personal commitment in a Senate hearing that she would handle this issue exactly the same way she has previously.
So what's gone on there?
From that?
Why?
Well, we know that in between that, she had a very fraught meeting with the Minister for Home Affairs. It was reported by your colleague Olivia Casely and others in the media that the Minister for Home Affairs reprimanded her for providing the Senate and me with information that we asked for.
And you think that might be behind her reticence this time?
It's hard to explain why all of a sudden we have a totally different approach, which is to not provide this basic information which the public's entitled to know.
Well, I know the Senate estimates start in about 5 minutes. We better let you go. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks, Kieran.
Parliamentarians and support